Welcome to Speed and Color, a podcast and YouTube channel about custom motorcycle culture. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to get all the latest content. You can also follow Speed and Color on Instagram. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello there. Well, today's episode is a little bit different, and I have to apologize. So what I'm doing is I'm reposting a previous episode, and let me tell you why. I do not understand YouTube. I am trying my little heart out, and YouTube is a complicated thing, and the infamous algorithm, it's a complex deal. I'm going to be honest with you. This episode is the one where Brent and I talk about the shovel head bobber that they built at PFX. I thought it was a decent episode. I got to tell you, the thumbnail is very similar to another good episode we did, got good views. It's Brent, it's PFX. The format was very much like the Softail lowrider that we did. You can see the numbers. I'm here to tell you, the one on my Sportster, good numbers. I was very happy with that one. The Softail, good numbers, and it continues to chalk up the views. It's steadily getting more and more views. Really, really good. I've had other episodes that have done, what I consider to be reasonably well. We're not going viral or knocking it out of the park yet, but we're also dealing with a limited market. But the shovelhead bobber fell flat. I mean, it's actually embarrassing. It did so poorly. So what I'm doing, I'm re-recording the introduction. I am going to repost it. I'm going to change the thumbnail. I'm going to change the description. I'm going to change some things. Because I've tried changing things on the fly. It really hasn't made any difference. And I'm going to relaunch it this week again and see what it does if I change all those things. If I change all those things and there's no difference, then I guess I know what it isn't. But if I change those things and suddenly we start to get views, and I think most of the views will come from YouTube recommending that video to people. And I think that's the problem right now, is for some reason, YouTube is not recommending that video. And I don't understand why. Anyway, that's where I'm at. I apologize. I hope you'll bear with me. If you're one of the handful of people who watched this episode, I'm sorry, and I feel bad for you. You're not going to get much new content, but you are going to get some new content this week, because I'm going to show you something here. But if you haven't seen the video, great. You're going to get to see it for the first time. So that's wonderful. What I'm going to offer you, I'm going to show you a product, and this particular episode got me thinking a lot about this, because one of the features of this bike is no front brake, but Brent, and I understand his concern for safety and everything else, Brent wanted some means of having of being able to apply the back brake without your foot. So if you've got a foot clutch and you've got the rear brake, you can't really use both when you're stopped. So if you're on flat ground, you can have one foot or the other down. You can jockey around. But if you're on a hill, how do you hold the bike? Brent had a lot of concern for that. And the solution they came up with is innovative. It's okay. It certainly will work. I just thought that it kind of went against the reason for not having a front brake, or one of the reasons. So I'm going to leave that up to you as to whether you like what PFX did, or you're thinking that there should be a different solution for it. And I'm going to offer you what I've come up with as a solution. And being that I'm a drag racer, For years, line locks, or what Hurst calls roll control, have been, I mean, they're just part of what you use in drag cars. So this device, what it does in a drag car, and if you already know this, I'm sorry, I don't mean to treat you like you're dumb, but for people who don't know what it does, in the burnout box, perfect example. So you pull into the burnout box, whether you have a foot brake or a hand brake, you pump the brake a couple of times. There's a switch on the steering wheel typically. You set the switch and that activates this solenoid, which is in the hydraulic line. So it holds the brake pressure and in the case of a drag car, on the front brakes. So you're holding the front brakes on, you're in the burnout box. The rear wheels, when you release the foot or hand brake, the rear wheels, the brakes aren't on, so they can spin freely. So now you're holding the front brakes, you can spin the back, you do your burnout, and when you release the button, the front brakes come off and the car moves out of the water box. Pretty simple stuff. So I got thinking, I guess I should say too, on the starting line, a lot of guys will use a line lock. Some guys use a foot brake. Depends what class you're running, what you're doing with the car and how you're set up. But a lot of guys will use a line lock on the starting line. And again, all you're doing is holding typically the front brakes on with a button, and as soon as you release it, away you go. So I got thinking about the case of a brake with a foot clutch and with no front brake on the bike. And I thought, well, it'd be pretty easy to have a small micro switch on the throttle, on the housing, or even mounted right to the grip. There's all kinds of different ways you could put a switch on there. And the switch would activate the roll control or the line lock. So what you would do is you would put the rear brake on, set the switch. Now you can take your foot off the brake, put it on the ground, whatever. The rear brake is still held on by the button that typically you have your thumb on. You could have it on your index finger too. It doesn't matter. However you want to activate it is fine. That would be kind of nice, because then when it's time to go, you can have your left foot on the foot clutch, you start to release the clutch, you release the button, the brake comes off, and you pull away. That's all real good. You could, I'm thinking you could run this, if you were running a Moto Gadget, you could probably use one of the accessory outputs on the Moto Gadget to activate the roll control. And that would be pretty sexy, because then you're just dealing with a ground from the switch, which means you can run one of those very light current small switches. That would work well, and activate it through the Moto Gadget, through the M unit. And I'm not sure if there's a timer there, but the other option that would be available to you is to use a timer circuit and have almost like a hill start assist on a new Goldwing or something like that. So you could set a timer that when you release the button, so now you're free to work the throttle, you've got the foot clutch. Let's say you set the timer for 2 seconds. So you see the light turn yellow for the traffic going the opposing way, you're on a hill, you release the button and you give it a little throttle and you load the clutch, and you know that in 2 seconds the rear brake is going to come off. So there's all kinds of things you could do there. It really depends on your driving style, on the geography, you know, what kind of hills and everything you deal with. But I think it's kind of cool that you could play with this stuff. The other thing I thought is in regard to the clutch. Now, most foot clutches are going to be mechanical. I get it. The clutch is close to the primary, it's close to the clutch, activating it with a rod or whatever. Very, very simple. However, if you wanted to go with a hydraulic clutch, you could have a very simple master cylinder, slave cylinder setup to activate the clutch. And in that case, with a foot clutch, there's a few different things you could do. You could have a switch under the clutch at the extreme travel. So when you put your foot down on the clutch, you hit the switch, now you've activated the roll control. And if you made that not a temporary switch, but a toggling switch. So you activate it, the roll control is on, holding the slave cylinder and the clutch. Now you can take your foot off of the foot clutch, and simply by pressing it again all the way down to the switch, that would then release the roll control and the slave cylinder and allow you to pull away. That's a real simple setup. You might want to get more elaborate and set it up so that you've got a thumb or index finger switch on the handlebars. Very discreet, not like a big lever or anything like that, just something very discreet. So now you'd kind of have a two-switch setup, like a safety switch you'd have in a nitrous system, so that you have to have your one button activated to activate the other one, and then they both have to come off. There's a bunch of different ways you could set it up. But like I say, if you went with a hydraulic clutch, now you've got all of those options for setting it up. And if you really wanted to get tricky, you could have a roll control on the brake, and you could use one on the clutch side, and then, man, you could set it up to your liking. It could be a pretty skookum deal. These roll controls, I'll try and zoom in on that. I'll take a picture of that as well. This solenoid is really fairly small. The hydraulic line just comes in and out. Then there's a little bit of electronics. There's an indicator light. There's a switch. You can certainly replace this switch with what you want to use, especially in the case of a moto gadget. Gives you all kinds of options. This is kind of cool because if you didn't want anybody to know what you're doing, this could be mounted on the bottom of the frame, under the engine, on the back of the engine. Could be mounted a bunch of different places. And again, be very discreet. People would not notice it necessarily. The other thing that you could do too, though, is if you're kind of proud of your setup and you wanted to get people talking, this could be mounted right out in plain view. And if this is old thinking that I'm coming up with here, geez, I apologize. I haven't seen anybody do this. I haven't heard anybody talk about this. I'm thinking this is not all that well, if not well known, it's not all that well used. So it might be kind of cool if you had one or two of these mounted in an obvious place that people would look at it and go, what the heck is that? What's he doing with that, right? Or she. Anyway, that's my deal on roll control, or a line lock, as they're more commonly referred to, I believe. Hurst makes a really good product. I've used these for years in the drag car. These things are just rock solid. They're fantastic. I believe B&M makes one now too. I have no experience with the B&M one. I hear the B&M stuff might be a little pricier. I don't know that for sure, so you'd have to check into it. But I will say, you cannot go wrong with this Hurst roll control. Hey, if you try it, let me know. Let me know how it works out, if this is a new idea for you. If you've already done it, I'd love to hear how it worked out for you too, and how you set it up. This is probably going to go, I moved it. This is probably going to go on that Yamaha chopper that I'm building, the XS650, for next year, because I really want a foot clutch and a jockey shift. So I think I'm going to make use of this. The engine's right behind me there. Anyway, that's it. That's what I had to tell you. That's extra value to go along with this replayed episode. Thank you for your patience with me. Thank you for your loyalty and watching. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe and hit the notifications button, because we've got build stuff on here now. Build stuff is a new segment we're doing. It is not scheduled, so you can't just pick it up every second Wednesday. You can come on and look for it and see if there's a new episode. But if you turn on notifications, we'll tell you when there's a new build stuff that you can tune in and watch. Okay, and you don't want to miss any BS. Let's get into this. Thank you for watching. Appreciate you being here. I will talk to you again soon. Thanks. All right, here we are back for another feature bike. I'm excited about this one. Boy, I just love this bike. I was looking forward to this. So I am going to turn it over once again. Brent Robertson, PFX, Precision Frameworks, with me with this bike. I'm going to turn it over to Brent. And of course, first question is, what the heck did this thing start out as?
I'm good, Bruce. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I feel like we've done this already today.
No, I know, yeah, right?
The shirt's a dead giveaway.
I brought a change of shirt, but I didn't realize I was standing, so yeah, it's all good. Bruce, this shovelhead bobber, I tell you, we haven't done many shovelhead bobbers. Maybe back 2004, 2005, 2000s, we did those, but when this client gave us this project, I was all for it, because we haven't done one for so long that I was like, yeah, for sure, sounds good. He was really liking the style of Jeff Cochran. Don't know Speed King. I'm not too sure what his handle is on that, but there's a lot of influence, like a lot of influence. And the client customer was going to get one built by him, but he thought that he would, support us locally. So that was good. I was glad for that opportunity. But where did it start? 1981, Harley-Davidson FXE, I think it was a 19 FXE. I had this bike sitting in the showroom for probably, well, I'll tell you, Bruce. There was a friend of mine that was going on an extended stay vacation, and he needed some money before he went away, and so I bought the bike off of him. He finished his holiday 7 years later, and I still didn't touch the bike. So this bike was sitting in the front showroom for probably about 10 years, just kind of sitting by the pop machine and the old tires and stuff like that. Now the client comes in, shows me a couple pictures on his phone, and I go, yeah, we have that thing over there, just let me dust it off for you, and that'll be the prime candidate. And so we had this bike over in the corner of the shop for, like I say, 10 years. And I think I wanted $7,500 for it. 1981 shovelhead. It was all complete. It was running. Every now and then I had this urge to pull it out and do something to it. And it just wasn't my love. It wasn't my feeling. So it sat there. Customer client comes in, shows me the pictures. Yep, we dust it off. We pull it out. We dust it off. We get it running. We get it fired up. And then we disassemble it. So then we made this bike that you see today. So Springer front end, drop seat frame, and we'll talk about everything here. And we'll start from the front of the bike and we'll go our way back, all right?
Perfect.
So the client, he's given us these references, and that's good, Bruce, because so many people have come into the shop over the years and they go, I want a custom bike. I want something badass. I want something to piss off my neighbors. I don't know what I want. And so we ask people, and now especially with social media and Instagram and Facebook and Reels and stuff like that, it's been better, because I go, no, show me some pictures of what you really like, because I don't know what's inside your head. Your taste and my taste are different. So this client came in with some pictures, and it was great, because it was a good starting point. Okay, this is what you want? You want to take this and make it look like that? Okay, it's your money. We'll do it. No problem. So that's where it all started, because at the beginning, it had a wide glide front end on it, right? It had an enclosed primary. It had floorboards. I can't remember what the bars were. I think they were apes of some sort. So let's just take that bike, disassemble it. Let's keep what we want. And in this case, we kept the frame, we kept the motor. Yep. That's it. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's it. So, and I'll tell you why we didn't even keep the tranny right away here. So, client really wanted, and you know what? I'm going to tell you. So his name is Don. Okay, because that way it's easier for me to say client all the time. So Don wanted a Springer front end, and so okay, the bike's on our stand. We got wheeling stands around here, and so that's where we disassembled it. And we want a Springer front end. Okay, so we did the math on the Springer front end. We figured out what we needed, what the length over we need. We can't really adjust too much of the rake trail unless we move it into the rockers here by moving the axle slightly forward.
Correct.
So we kept the frame, the neck of the frame in our stock position. We didn't go crazy on our front end. I think we went to a +2, raised it up a little bit to compensate for this 21-inch wheel knobby tire. This is a different look. Like, this is not something you see all day. It looks a little aggressive. Top of my head, can't think of the brand, but when I did research it, it was a dual sport tire that could handle a 200 kilometer an hour rating. And so it was a 70% on-road, 30% off-road. So then I felt comfortable giving it to Don and using it on the road, because I didn't want these lugs to rip off on the road. They're not made for high speed. So
And this is very much a Jeff Cochran kind of style, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Like, during building this bike, you know, a lot of influence from Jeff, and I could see a few of his bikes had this on, like this look, right? This look, this style. So we go with the Springer front end. We go with the 21-inch wheel. If you notice, we also don't have a front brake on this bike. Don was adamant he didn't want a lot of clutter up there. In the beginning, he didn't want a front fender either. No problem. So if you can just picture, no front fender on a Springer, knobby 21-inch front wheel, no front brake. Okay. In that was also, I want a hand shift and a foot clutch. And I'm like, no problem. I gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're going to ride it, not me. And so it was all good. But then we go back to this front end here. So Tim, our fabricator, made up these beautiful axle spacers that go from the end of the rockers and flow right into the hub. We went with a spoolless hub, I think that's called, or a spool hub, spool hub. So it's got no brake provisions for mounting a disc on there or anything like that.
Right.
Nice and clean front end. Well, the problem with the Springer front end is the risers. So there is companies, Arlen-Ness, Mid-USA, they'll make an adapter that all the risers, they bolt, all the handlebar risers bolt through and into the fork assembly. Mid-USA, Arlen-Ness makes a handlebar riser adapter because the spacing of a riser on a Springer is, I think, 4.5 inches. A spacing on any other Harley in the world is 3.5 inches. So you can't take a 3.5-inch bar and put it on a Springer because you would see all the knurling and all the clamping area. So then when you're looking for a Springer handlebar, you're really limited. You're limited because it's, every bike in the world is 3.5-inch space, and then the Springers are 4.5. So we bought a bunch of bars, and I tell you, I can't, lowbrow, Todd Cycle, stuff like that. Don, we weren't happy with the way the fit and the finish and the feel was. So once again, Tim, our fabricator, Fat Cat Customs, he made the bars. He was able to make the bars 1-inch diameter, knurled it exactly where we wanted.
Nice.
Turned the pull back to where we wanted. Gave us our nice little narrow swoop because a lot of the bars were also too wide. Mm-hmm. And on a Springer front end, Springer front end is narrow, and we don't want a wide bar. In the time of making the bars, also had Tim put on these little brake lines here, and hopefully you can get a close-up of these. So I'm not a fan of zip ties. And the reason being is that if we're in the process of building something and we're going to plate it or chrome it or paint it, let's forward think to the final assembly of the bike. And so, you know, I asked Tim to put these little holders on here. And to me, those little holders, yes, we're married to the front brake all the time. I mean, to the master cylinder all the time. If you remove it, yeah, we have a couple little holders there, but it just ties up and doesn't have the zip ties going around the handlebars. And those are the attention to details that really irks me when we're in control of it, because I want to, at the end of the day, I want to give the client the end product they want. Like when people go, oh wow, it's nice and clean. Yeah, it's clean because it's the shit you don't see, right? Like if it was all gaudy and zip ties and Velcro and cup holders and stuff like that, then it wouldn't seem clean. But if it seems like, oh wow, that's nice and clean, yes, that's what I'm looking for. I want it to seem seamless. So we made the bars, we made those holders here for the brake lines. We had them chromed locally with a bunch of other stuff. We'll talk about that in a bit here. As I'm talking to Don, Don's an old school biker guy, and he's like, no, I just want a foot clutch, hand banger, no front fender, no speedo, no signal lights, no nothing. Well, I've tried to convey to him that he might not keep the bike forever, and if we're building the bike now, I can make the provisions for that, but for all those safety things right now, and that way, if he ever sells the bike, there's not like added costs down the road, because when I do it now, I can factor all that in now, and I don't have to worry about repaint or chrome. So we have these super tiny little signal lights in the front here, and they're like they're not like big and bulky. They're not like a spruce, like annoying, like to look at. It's like they're hidden.
And honestly, Brent, I've seen this bike, I don't know, 6 or 8 times. Today was the first time I ever noticed those.
Yeah, so and that's what we're trying to achieve. Super bright, you know, maybe they should be a little bit farther out from the headlight, but they're there, they work, and that's it. It's good. So when Don didn't want a front fender, and then when I talked him into doing the speedo and the horn and the signal lights and making it street legal, and not really street legal, but legal for resale later on down the road. He's like, okay, well, you better put a fender on. So then Tim, the fabricator, came up with the brackets to mount to the Springer and then to mount to a Y-Glide fender. We eliminated the rivets on the fender, welded the fender up, so when we got it painted, it just once again seems seamless. This fender unbolts, like no problem, but because of the paint job and the finish, it looks okay. It's not like gaudy. It's okay.
Yeah, no, it looks great. Looks great.
Excuse me.
Whose Springer is this?
This one here is a trade secret. No, Bruce, I'm just kidding. So when we talked an episode ago about DNA and they had the Springers, this is actually V Factor Mid-USA. So V Factor, it's kind of nice because it has this vintage look here of the gusseting, and the casting looks like casting, where the DNA one is machined steel. So this has more of a authentic vintage look. Also, once again, lots of serviceable grease certs everywhere, and so I chose that one over the DNA. Just for styles and aesthetics, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I did stop in the day after Tim had made those spacers, and he had to show them to me, and was he ever proud of those? He did a great job on them.
Yeah, for sure. Once again, just seamless, right? Like when you look at the taper from the axle going just a slight cone going up to the height of it, it's so easy to just take bar stock, round stock, lob it off, call it a day, have the bearings exposed. No, it's
yeah, no, these are beautiful. The other thing about this that I don't see on a lot of rims or a lot of hubs is this has a curve to it.
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd call that in there.
No, a radius, I don't know.
But I like it. It's really nice. It's a nice detail.
Yeah, no, for sure. We bought a couple of these rims in the past for, bobber choppers type customers, and they all have that feature. And I don't know, Bruce. I don't know where that came from or originated from. And it's more of a machine process when they're making the hub, so I don't know why they would do it, but it adds a nice touch.
Looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to tell you about the motor here.
Oh, before you do that,
please.
So you said neck. We didn't do anything to this frame. It's just the way it should be.
Yeah, Don wanted to make sure that he had a Harley VIN number registerable bike.
Okay.
So in in our province here, you can build a home built or a custom built bike from scratch. You just have to get it certified and approved. The Alberta Insurance Bureau will come and inspect that bike, and they'll VIN it for you, because that VIN number has to be in the system in order to register it. So then it's classified as a U-built or a home built or a custom built. Well, when it is classified as a U-built, home built, or custom built, only you're limited to the insurance companies that are interested in taking that liability. So by having an original number, it's more beneficial to the owner as well as to the insurance company to get proper value for it. Now, keep in mind, you look at this bike right now, and we call it an 81 FXE. Blue book on this is going to be $8,000. That's not true. We're going to need an appraisal on this for sure. But registered wise, yes, it's going to be an 81 FXE.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, no problem. So, motor. Shovel heads have a tendency of leaking, right? They just the way that the technology was built back from 1966 to 1984, 85. The cast finish, the factory finish, like tolerances and production have definitely increased in the years, and everything. Like everything. If you just think of all manufacturing has been better from the World War I, World War II eras, for sure.
Right.
So we disassembled this motor completely, balanced the flywheels, rehoned the cylinders. It's still only an 80 cubic inch shovel head. We didn't go crazy on it. This motor was a dual plug head. In order to keep it nice and clean and simple, I didn't want to run 4 plugs. So the other side has got decomps into the spark plug holes.
Okay.
Not necessary. The bike fires up great, kicks over good, but rather than put a dummy spark plug in there, we put the decomps over on the other side of the head. And and they are right there, right in between the spark plugs.
Okay, yeah.
And they're functional, nice. For sure. Yeah. Don did not want any polish on the bike. He wanted chrome. So, rocker boxes, nose cone, lifter tappets, the oil pump, everything had to be show chrome. So, disassembled the engine, like I said. We went through the flywheels, we went through the cylinders, we got the engine and cylinders powder coated. We bead blasted the cylinder heads because that was kind of a style back in the 80s on the shovel heads. It was that two-tone color. And we could have quite easily powder coated the heads black. We could have polished them, that would have been there, but we went kind of area corrected, like year corrected, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But modernized it a bit by the powder coat and the chrome.
Yeah, it's a great look.
It is. So 80 cubic inch S&SE carburetor, small little air filter on here. We still ran the dual cables, so we have the idle and the throttle and idle cables.
Right.
Dyna 2000i ignition. Cam, I'm trying to think what the cam is right now. I can't remember what the cam is, just because shovel heads, we don't do a lot of shovel heads. Eagles, I know we do an EV27. I can't remember what the spec was on the cam. Adjustable push rods, new roller rockers up in the heads. Went through the engine completely, I can't emphasize enough that everything got touched and changed or replaced on the engine. And then we go to the transmission. So when I said earlier, put the bike on the lift, take everything you want, you don't want to use, get rid of it. Leave the frame of the motor. Don wanted a foot clutch hand shift. So the transmission from 1979 and up is called a cow pie transmission. And the top of the shifter, and cow pie I think because it looks like a piece of cow pie, and not one that you would want to eat. So this is a ratchet top. So Harley-Davidson made ratchet top trannies up to 1979. We needed the ratchet top tranny in order to get the gearing and the shifting that Don requested. Because it's a hand banger, it's pull one back and three forward. So it's, we couldn't achieve that with the cow pie. So we took all the guts out of the cow pie transmission, got a ratchet top transmission, powder coated it, rebuilt it with the guts and the internals from the 1981 tranny, got the chrome covers, the chrome ratchet top, and then we made the hand shifter and foot clutch. And later on we'll switch the bike around here, and I'll show you those features. But at the same time, if we went to the ratchet top, well, then we opened up that we could go to that 2-inch primary, because that 2-inch primary only fit the ratchet tops and didn't fit the cow pie. So spent a little money, did a little, like quite a bit of extra work to achieve this bike by utilizing the 81, where if we had a 77 or a 78 or maybe a 76, we might have been a little bit better off, but we had the 81, Don purchased it off of us, and we went to town on it. So that's how we got to this here.
Cool.
This bike also has kickstart and electric start.
Oh, it is both?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thanks to the BDL's 2-inch belt drive system we have, it also has a built-in 1.4 kilowatt electric starter, and the kick, and Bruce, you're more than welcome to kick it. I'm not interested. I can hit the button, no problem, okay? All good there. The exhaust over on this side of the bike, Don really wanted the 2-in-1 with a fishtail with a slight upswept. So 2-in-1, yeah, no problem. They make those for the FLHs and stuff like that. So we bought that as a header, and then Tim here made just a slight bend, and then we got a fishtail, and then he lopped it off so that we could just have it right to the same sort of angle or the end of the bike. And you know, when we talk about chrome in the other episode, you can see the difference here from chrome from a supplier, a supplier, to the chrome that we had to get locally. It's just off that little bit, and that small pet peeve for me. So
I can tell that bothers you, but I think that's nickel content, if I remember correctly. Usually gives you just that little bit of yellow.
Oh, I feel much better now.
Yeah. But you know what? We have a local chrome shop, Brent. I'm a happy guy, and they do pretty nice work. I've been pretty happy with
Alberta
their
Chrome,
stuff.
Anthony and Tony over there, I've been using them ever since day one, for sure. It's just unfortunately the city laws have mandated that they have to change. They have to change, and it's unfortunate that this is the way we're going. You know what I mean? So,
Yes. But it's all that environmental stuff, and it's here whether we like it or not.
No, you're right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So.
But that's a great exhaust. I love the way that turned out. You know, and this is what I love about the art in motorcycles is, you know, that was, you said it's Don, right?
The customer, yeah.
Yeah. So that was Don's idea, where he saw that, whatever, you know, that's what he wanted, and it looks great, and I haven't seen another one like it. So I think that's wonderful. It just works out.
Good. So then, now the frame. So when we disassemble the bike and we're working on the frame, you know, once again, Jeff Cochran has what's called a drop seat section. And so if you look here, and this is hopefully for your viewers, your audio people have got to get YouTube. So I'll just lift this up for a second.
Yeah.
So this drops down slightly. And so Jeff Cochran sells this rear section, and we cut the tubing. We cut this tubing, and what it does is positions the shock and the seat into a different, I don't know if it's 1 inch, 1.5 inches, I'm not too sure. But we do that prior to the paint and the powder coat and stuff like that. So we modified the frame. We filled in all the Harley extra voids, you know, the casting pieces, filled it all in so it's all smooth. So then when we do send the bike out for powder coat paint or chroming, it's more seamless. And so that was just another frame modification that we did. Also too, when I told you about the handlebars that we did, the clamps on the up here for the brake line, Tim also carried that along the frame here. And if you take a look at this, Bruce, once again, it's just no zip tie. You know, like it's just the brake line runs nice and tight to the frame and color it in.
And those guides, whatever you want to call them, those are welded on?
Welded onto the frame, positioned where they needed to be. And then when we built the brake line, we built the brake line with the bike assembled. So if we ever have to remove the handlebar or we have to do something, we're redoing the brake line. That's the downside to it.
Right.
But the upside is the cleanliness. Like it's clean. It's clean and
No,
smooth.
it's very nice.
For sure.
Excellent.
And then went with the black braided oil lines as well. Round oil tank. So I'm not a fan of round oil tanks, and I'll tell you why. Because I have to hide the wiring somewhere. And a round oil tank generally is round and holds oil, and that's it. And so a horseshoe one or anything like that, I have a little place to hide some wires. And so I want you to get a close-up of what we can do here. But so Tim added the skirts to the side of the round oil bucket and had them come in nice and tight to the frame on each side here. And that allowed me a little bit of room here to put two relays, two 30-amp relays, a starter relay, the turn signal module box, the speedo box, and everything just hidden in this little clevis here.
Yep.
So
once again,
those are the details that the average person doesn't see or appreciate, and unless you're hands-on during the process and you pick up like why your bill is this bill, because we do this now for down the road to appreciate it.
Right. Yeah, if you don't notice it, then it was done right.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're winning.
Yeah.
That's right.
For sure. Yeah. Ignition switch over on this side.
Yeah, so when we flip the bike over, Bruce, I'll talk about that and stuff like that.
But it's tied in nice and tight there.
Yeah,
Everything's
and
close.
So I'm a big fan of the automotive crank switch. So when you just looked up at the handlebars for switches.
I sure did.
I know you did. Everyone does. We didn't want anything up here. Okay?
Right.
So our headlight switch is on the headlight bucket. Our turn signals are on this little panel that Tim made on the back of the oil bucket here, and I'll show that again.
Oh,
and our
okay.
start button is crank like an automotive crank.
Right.
Big fan of that because that takes care of the overload and everything and the snapback, and it's perfect. And the downside is to shut the bike off, you shut it off like a key.
Yeah.
Right.
So out of curiosity, I was just watching a video the other day, and they were talking about this kind of switch, but it also had a push function. So you could hook up the terminals so you either turn the key to crank it or you push the switch.
Yeah.
But this one is strictly a turn the key.
Yeah, crank it on, and you feel it. It's just like putting it into your car. You feel it, and it bounces back. It springs back to the neutral position.
Nice.
Yeah, good there. Other side of the bike here. So once again, we have the short little signal lights, small little signal lights down here. This frame being an FXE frame or an FLH frame would have had the twin shocks on the outside and would have had the fender mounted to the frame. We call those frame horns. We cut the frame horns off, eliminated the struts, and we mounted the fender directly to the swing arm, and we made the fender struts to the swing arm as well.
Right.
The reason for doing that is that we can get this fender tight to this tire all the time.
Right.
So every time it's always going to look like that, and it'll be nice and tight. The downside to that is that if you were to ever have a passenger on here, your passenger is going to be going up and down with the fender. As the road travels and the bumps in the road, the railroad tracks,
Right.
all that stuff, there's no real cushion. So when we do this modification, generally we don't have a passenger pad or a passenger seat for that reason. But when we do it, we can achieve this look, and that the radius will always match the tire, you know, with the exception of a small chain adjustment and stuff like that. But it's clean, it's tight fitting, and we're not
Right.
we don't have to be concerned about extra moving parts. So when we cut the struts off and the horns off, that gave us a perfect opportunity where to put the signal lights. And once again, the signal lights, and you know what, hopefully later when you do a couple of close-ups and stills, like we even have small little welded tabs onto the back of the frame so I can minimize the zip ties. And you'll see, I do have zip ties here, but I'm not running around the frame. I have
Exactly.
I have
Yep.
saddles for them to keep it inside.
Yep.
And I think, you know, that is a tough thing to set apart, like, you know, a bike build and a bike build, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and I say that we have done a lot of bike builds, but only high caliber bike builds,
Right.
a half a dozen, like not a, maybe a dozen. So,
Yeah.
because it's labor, it's time, it's labor, and it's effort, and it's thoughtful, right? It's, at the end of the day, you have to plan out the whole thing. So,
Right. And you know, Brent, I'm just going to make a comment on that because I have utmost respect for anybody who's building custom stuff, and I love it all. But you see a lot of guys who are less experienced, working at home, don't have the tooling, whatever, and there are things that get done that are not clean, and that's just going to happen, and that doesn't make them bad builders or anything like that. We all do what we're capable of doing, and if you looked at my Sportster, there's some clamps on there. Now they're nice, they're aluminum, they're rounded, they came from lowbrow, they look great, but it's still clamped onto the frame.
Yep.
Where you've gone one step further because you can. I think all of it is great though. Like I don't care if it's rattle canned and you got some clamps on it and whatever, you're trying, and that's the main thing. But what you guys do here is definitely just that cut above.
Bruce, don't get me wrong, for sure. A lot of my business is the guys that are home builders that come over the front counter and buy stuff, and you know they pick our brain for information. Totally. I was a home builder at one time too, but to where I am now, that's where I really like working with a certain client that wants that high end, because that's what I really like, and if we can achieve it, I want to give it. Right, and if they don't have their budget, well, yeah, we'll do the clamp, we'll do the thing and stuff like that. Like at the end of the day, I still got to keep my doors open. So it's not a bad thing. It's just, for me, it irks me. And I've said this before. I'll start building a bike for myself, and I already know when I'm in the middle of it that I don't want the bike. I already know that. I know I don't care when I finish it or anything like that, because I quit loving it already.
Right.
But when I build a bike and I'm hands on a bike, that it's going well, and the team's all working together and stuff like that, and I know what the outcome's going to be, oh yeah, I'm going to love that bike for sure.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I don't diss anyone. Like, you
No,
know,
you know, I don't want it to sound egotistical, but it's funny. It's one of those human nature things where there's people who look at my bike and go, wow, you know, you really put a lot of detail in. And then I come in and look at this and I think, oh my God, I am such a fucking hack. I have no idea what I'm doing, right? So, you know, we're all at different levels, but it's all good that we're doing the best we can. So,
you know, Bruce, with that, so in the last, like December, I was over in Indonesia, and, you know, I got friends over there, and I went to a bike shop over there, and I watched these guys fucking bang out aluminum on the ground, and we have so many more tools than they do, and my stuff was shit compared to what they were doing.
Right.
So
right.
yeah, they put the skill, the talent, and the time into it, and the pride into it, and with what they got, and it's just mind-blowing.
It's humbling to know that there's always somebody better than you are.
Yeah, totally.
It's good.
Totally.
It's good.
Yeah, for sure. All right,
Right
so
on.
we'll carry on with the bike here.
Are you going to tell us about that seat? You flipped it up a couple of times, and is there a story about it at all?
Well, there is a story about it. Don wanted a very thin, low-profile seat. He had one of my other bikes years ago, which was just an aluminum pan with my logo engraved in it and stuff like that, and he loved that seat. So he wanted something very similar, but with a little cushion. So once again, Tim hammered out this seat pan, and it's all. I think it was stainless. I'm looking at the mounts here. Made these dowels, put these rubbers on here for a little bit of a cushion, but then Tim took this to his mom, and his mom covered the seat, padded it in her house, and she's not a leather person. Like, she does leather stuff, of course, but she just did a fantastic job on that seat. Like,
it's fantastic.
And the braiding along the side.
Exactly. The detail is beautiful.
It's great. Yeah.
Good.
You know what? And while we're in here at the seat, I'll tell you about the gas tank. So the gas tank, when we were doing this project, we must have bought, I don't know, a half a dozen gas tanks. Nothing was like standing out to Don or to myself. Like, they were all just kind of it's a gas tank. It's a gas tank. And it wasn't really, none of the gas tanks were really talking to us. And so Don, being an old school guy, he's like, no, let's just go with the King Sporty tank, and that's it. So that was one of the tanks that we did have here. So the King Sporty tank had the filler right in about this area here. And so Tim flush mounted the bottom side of it, and you might be able to see that from the bolts here. Changed the bottom of the tunnel out. Then he cut a hole in the bottom of the tunnel and banged all this flat. And I tell you, working on the other side here, Tim's working on the other side, it drove me fucking nuts for 3 days, him banging that out. And I went over there a couple times. I'm like, the body guy will do it. The body guy will do it. Like, enough already. But it turned out fantastic. And the body guy did very minimal. Tim then raised the fuel cap all the way up to the top so we can get maximum fuel capacity. Filled in the front of this tunnel here so it just clears the backbone.
Yep.
Moved the petcock location all the way back for maximum fuel. And then he put the little sight gauge here on the side. Now, so the one thing is that when we have the fabrication department and we have the assembly department, they don't get the same memos from one another. So Tim actually designed this to have an S shape into it to match the struts and match the shifters. Unfortunately now, it's sealed, it's painted, and the guy that put it, Jay, when he put it together, didn't know that. He just did a straight line. So will we wait till it runs out, or we will just leave it? It's hard to say. Stay tuned. We might change it. We might change it to what it should have been. Yeah.
Right.
And then also on this side of the bike here, when I talked about that there's no front brake on this bike, but we do have a front brake lever. So if you can just imagine that you have a foot clutch and you have a hand shift, and this foot's on the ground because this one's on the clutch, what's stopping you? So we did a hand brake that runs along the frame and runs to one of the rear calipers. So we have a foot brake with a brake line running to one rear caliper and a hand brake running to the other one. So now when you're at a light, on a hill, foot on the clutch, 1 foot down, stabilizing, you can still hold the bike up, and your other hand's on the shifter. You're busy. You're not smoking and you're not texting. You're ready to rock and roll.
Cool.
So that's why we have the dual 4-piston PM calipers on the rear. We made the bracket in-house. Once again, the swing arm. It's a Jeff Cochran fully adjustable. It's an inch, I think, or an inch and a half raised up swing arm, so it gives it that lower stance. But once again, when we talk about Jeff Cochran influence, definitely another product that we bought and attached it to the bike here for sure.
Yeah. Great.
Progressive suspension. I think they're the 444 shocks, chrome. We went with them because they had a nice little feature. And then once again, I hope you get a close-up on this. Tim machined all these spacers for a radius, so they're not just bar stock again. It's small details of everything fit and finish-wise.
Perfect.
Side of the bike.
All right, should we flip it around and
flip it
cover
around.
this side? Because I got all kinds of questions for you about over here. All right, let's move it.
Okay, Bruce.
All right, so it's flipped around. Thank you for doing that.
No problem. It's a nice and easy and nimble bike to move around
Yeah.
compared to some pigs.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you know how much it weighs?
No. This
Okay.
much. It weighs this much.
This much, okay. Very good.
So-
So, yeah, I have questions about the foot clutch because I've been wanting to do a foot clutch on something that I build.
Yep.
So I've been doing a little bit of research, and there's some different terms and all kinds of stuff, and I'm gonna get you to try and clarify for us. So there's a rocker, or what was at one time called a safety clutch.
Yep.
So going way back to when you pushed it and it stayed in that position, so you could put your foot down, and then you had to, I guess, with your heel, move it again.
Rock it back.
Exactly.
Yep.
So they were pretty good, except if they got worn out. I've read stuff that said if they got worn out, they wouldn't hold, whatever. Then you have a foot clutch that I guess is called a suicide clutch, where you have to have your foot on it to keep it depressed. And then is a recluse the same as an automatic? Because I watched a video yesterday, as a matter of fact, doing some research on this, where the automatic clutch, you don't have to have your foot on the clutch when you start. So from an idle, as soon as you give it throttle, I take it it's almost some kind of centrifugal thing, but you do have to use the clutch to shift. But you don't have to use the clutch to get going. And that was typically called an automatic clutch. So there's all those differences. And then you get into the shifter, and it's called a suicide shifter or a jockey shifter. And some guys say if it's behind your leg, it's a jockey. If it's in front of it, it's a hand shifter. And it seems that there's a lot of different definitions for these terms. So go ahead, clarify it for us and tell us exactly what's going on.
So viewers, Bruce is looking to throw me underneath the bus, and he's doing a great job. So please leave all your comments and see what he does for his responses. So Bruce, thanks for the preparation on that. That was fantastic. Great job.
I assumed you would know this stuff.
I want to say, do I care? But
so which kind of clutch is this? Do you have to have your foot on this one?
No. So let's just go back to your rocker style one, okay? So your rocker style one, we see those generally on a lot of, let's just say, 1940s to 1960 era bikes.
Yes.
Let's just think about that, like, realistically, okay? And we'll use Harley-Davidson as a sample. We went from a bicycle to a single cylinder, right? So the evolution of the motorcycle from a bicycle to that, you know, cars and vehicles were around in the 30s and 40s. 1936 is when we started getting into the knucklehead, and so that was kind of the big twin, like the two-cylinder, and then it was still a hand shift, right? It was a tank shift with the rocker. Harley, let's just talk about them being just like pretty smart inventors, like from day one. And so they came up with the rocker, and like you say, you would put your foot forward and lock it in. Then you could put your hand down and have your hand on the handlebars, and you're ready to go. And did they have stoplights? I don't know. Were they stopping for something? I don't know. But anyways, you go to take off. Maybe there was traffic, and then you click the back of it, and you're easing it with your foot, and you're already still in gear, and so you can take off, and then you get going, and you can pull it again. So that was the start of the foot clutch, okay? And so, and don't, like, don't hold me accountable here for all negativity because I'm not interested. But so that's my thought on it and stuff like that.
Send the hate mail to Bruce.
Yes, please.
There you go.
Yeah, that's Brent. BRE. No. So now we talk about the foot clutch. So then, over the years, they simplified it, and it was just foot on, just like clutching your car or your truck. You know, you press the clutch pedal, and that engages the clutch, or disengages the clutch, I guess, with the terminology. And then you can find neutral at that time, put your foot down, or you can just leave it in first gear, and your foot's on the clutch. No different than when you're at a red light and your hand's on the clutch. You're pulling in the clutch, so you're not going nowhere. And then as soon as light turns green, you know, or that's safe to go, you ease off on the clutch or you ease off on the clutch. No big difference there. When you talk about the different terminology for jockey shift, hand shift, suicide shift, shit like that, I think everyone and their dog has their own opinion. Brent's opinion today, and has always been, that I feel a jockey is the one behind you, because when I see a jockey on a fucking horse, he's got the whip behind him. Right. And so to me, that's a jockey. And I have had people tell me I'm wrong, and once again, I don't give a shit, because that's what I think is what a jockey is. Comments to Bruce again. Yeah. So, and then we have a tank shift, and then we have a hand shift. The suicide shift, I don't know, Bruce. It's all fucking suicide to me.
Well, and then there's the one with the clutch on.
Oh yeah, we've done a couple of those.
And that, I think Mac referred to that as a suicide shift, because it means you've got to have one hand off the handlebars. Yeah.
The other thing though too, like when you ever get to ride one of these bikes with a foot clutch, that's foot pressure, right? This is hand leverage.
Yes.
And so if you have it at a shorter stance and you're pulling it and you're right there, it's usually like a bayonet or, you know, some sort of tractor shifter, you know, with a lever on it sort of thing. I would call that suicide as well too, or stupid shift, because it's one of the two. But it's kind of cool because it's all built into one right there, and you can still have both feet down and you're holding the clutch. So it is kind of cool. And don't get me wrong, the jockey shift, the foot clutch, and all that it cleans it. It makes it the mysterious, the wow factor. You know, like, ooh, you have one of those? Like, ooh, wow. You know, you have a unicorn? That's cool. Yeah. And so that's
I have to say, there was one guy, and if you happen to watch this video and know who you are, please don't be offended. I thought it was very entertaining. But he was blaming he was saying that the reason that chopper builders, guys in San Francisco, went away from the rocker style is the hippies wanted to lighten up their bikes, and that was one way to take a little bit of weight out of it, was to get rid of the rocker style clutch and just go with a regular foot clutch. And I think he also blamed the hippies for the jockey shift. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that everything was hippies' fault. And I'm thinking, hippies in San Francisco riding choppers, that's kind of cool. I don't have a problem with that. So anyway, it's quite a debate. There's lots of different terms. And,
totally. And that's what I mean. Like, throw me under the bus, great job. So it's all good. But everyone has their own opinion on it and stuff like that. We at the shop have probably built a dozen or so bikes with like hand shift foot clutches on them and stuff like that. And those dozen customers have all had a different terminology of it. So it's at the end of the day, whatever you like. It's all good. For me, the style of the bike and that is just not for me. But that's just me though. Don't worry about it. Like, you know, it's all good. Everyone has their own opinion.
Yeah.
So,
And again, with the San Francisco reference, there was one guy who said, boy, you want to see somebody who is skilled at holding the bike on a hill with the brake, putting that foot down, getting the clutch in, getting it in gear, and pulling away before he rolls very far backwards. And I was reading that, imagining, boy, that would be a skill.
And when people come to the front counter and that's what they want, right? And that's what I try to tell them. Because we only have a couple areas here in Calgary that have a reference of a hill. and I try to tell them, like by City Hall coming underneath, I'm like, just imagine, just picture, you know, this hand's doing nothing, your foot's on the clutch, you know, this one's on the rear brake. What do you got? What do you got going on? What's stopping you? What's putting you down? And I just try to bring people to the realization of real world of what it is. I've always said imagination and bank account dictates what type of bike you're going to get here. So I try to help with the imagination part.
And of course, all of this discussion doesn't matter in Saskatchewan because it's all flat ground anyway, so who cares, right? There you go. Good.
Yeah.
What else do you need to tell us about? You need to tell us about the chain. You could mention the primary again. Are you done with the foot clutch and stuff for now? Have we beat that to death?
So, Bruce,
and the tail light, of course, because we didn't. And the kickstand.
When we did do this foot clutch,
yes,
we went with a Dyna forward control mount.
Okay.
Dyna forward control only has the 2-bolt pattern, where because we don't have the kickstand bracket on the front no more.
Right.
Typically on an FL or most wide glides and stuff like that, you'd have a triangular 3-bolt pattern that would hold your shifter bracket as well as your kickstand. So I chose to go with the Dyna forward controls because I can use the 2 mounts, eliminate that third one, clean up the front end, and then I did a hidden Matt Hodge kickstand with an internal spring welded onto the frame. To achieve that, once again, the bike's together, it's off the stand, it's together, and it's on the ground. Tim lays on the ground, and someone holds the bike to where we're happy with the angle, and then he tacks it. We flip it back up, he tacks it a bit more, and we see, it holds its weight. Okay, we're good. Are we all happy with that? Yeah, we're all happy with that. Okay, that's all good. Back up on the bench again, disassemble it so you can weld that kickstand.
Right.
So,
yeah,
that's what's involved to put a kickstand on.
Yeah.
Now the primary, it's a 2-inch BDL primary. Now what's nice about the belt drive primary is that it's slender, it's compact, we don't have to worry about oil leaking. We also have the electric start there, but then we'll see here the mechanisms for the clutch. So we're pushing on this, which then is unfortunately the dome covers here, but this forward action pushes onto the clutch, and then this is our hand shifter, and you can see the rotary top, moving around there.
Right.
When we talk about this primary, and you talk about things that you don't see, this is our speedometer, this is our key switch, our coil wires are running behind the top motor mount, which is holding our jockey shift, but we have our coil mounted inside the primary, as well as our regulator bracket.
Nice.
So our regulator's back there. There's no regulator mounted up front. We've extended the wires, put this cover over top of it, ran the wires down the frame, made a new mount inside the primary, got the coil for the Dyna 2000i ignition inside the primary, just hidden, clean as much as possible, as much as possible.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I was wondering about the coil, but excellent.
Bruce, right? It's those things that if you don't see it, great.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chain and tail light.
Yeah, just a chain drive. That's pretty simple stuff. Nothing real crazy about it. The reason that we did go with gold though is because originally, we'll talk about the paint right away. The reason that we went with gold is because Don wanted black and gold paint job.
Okay.
As the bike is evolving and coming and taking shape, then he's thinking, well, maybe I should do something different because all my bikes are black and gold, and we should do something different. And so he gave kind of us free rein on the paint, and I think it turned out well. I think
excellent.
So.
Yeah, beautiful. So, love the green. The colors are great.
So Don was talking to Kyle, the parts guy, and talking about paint and stuff like that. So we got a hold of Roy over at Trip 6 up in just outside of Edmonton, and Roy painted all the bodywork, the multi-layered colors that you see it here now. And then when we picked it up and got it back here, it was like, that ain't gold, but it turned out fantastic. It looks good. And I got to tell you, it's always a thrill, or I really enjoy the customer client seeing the bike for the first time, and anybody, it doesn't matter, if it's a mild build or a high-end build. When they see it for the first time, that's the reaction that I love, and that's
Right.
that's kind of what I really enjoy about the business here is like making someone like happy and feel good.
Yeah.
So when Don seen this, he walked around the corner and like I can tell you he was very, very happy and very impressed.
Yeah.
He didn't get to choose the paint. We did, and he keep in mind that we went from black and gold to black and green, and he was fantastic. He said I put him out of his comfort zone, but he's happy with it. So yeah.
Trip 6 do the pinstriping as well on the tank, or
so when Roy did the paint job, you can see it's kind of a center panel idea going on.
yes,
When Jeff Shibby came here to do another bike for us, the brown root beer Cholo, we thought that this bike just needed a little something on the side of the oil bucket. And so while Jeff was here, I showed him the green, I showed him the paint. He came back a couple weeks later and just did a small little pinstripe. And you can see the symbol in the center of the gas tank. He tied that onto the pinstriping in the oil bucket. And once again, it was just a small little touch that nailed it pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. There's no other real
Very nice.
pinstriping on the bike, just
Nope.
on the side of the oil bucket. And it's great.
But it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and the black sides on the tank and outlining the fenders ties in so nicely to the engine and everything. Again, it's well thought out. Looks great.
Like I say, Don he's not a flashy person, and so he didn't want too much paint, because sometimes you can overdo paint, right? Like you can have too much of it. It's Liberace or Ric Flair or whatever like that. So we tried to minimize it, but still give it a wow factor and a pop factor. And,
Right.
Trip 6 did that by just doing the center panels, for sure.
Excellent.
Yeah. I don't think there's much else to talk about.
Rear tire?
Rear tire, once again, just an 18-inch, bias ply tire to kind of offset a little bit of the knobby in the front.
Mm-hmm.
We have an electronic speedo pickup drive off the rear axle because our speedometer is electronic. And electronic speedometers only started coming out on Harleys in 1995 and up. So we had to make that provision, or else it would have been a cable,
Right.
to somewhere ugly. So we don't want that. So we have an electronic speedo from Dakota Digital pickup running down to a drag specialty speedometer, so we can keep it just wires. Wires are easy to move. Cables are a pain in the ass.
Right. Cool. Very good. And I did want to say, because we've referred to Jeff Cochran a couple of times, I don't see anything wrong with getting inspiration from other builders. For me, paint-wise, paint like this is not new. It's very well done, and it's not a copy of anybody's, but it's certainly not a new idea either. It's okay that we get inspiration from places. It's maybe not cool to copy things exactly. With this, there's a Jeff Cochran inspiration or style to this, but it's not a Jeff Cochran bike.
No, and looking at, you're exactly right. I don't think I've ever met Jeff, but very impressed with all what he's got going on in his company and what he does and stuff like that. It's great. And it's a good thing. Inspiration, yes, definitely. Looking a lot more on his posts and his Instagrams and stuff like that. There's things that we went a little bit above, right? Like we gave it the precision taste. We took his inspiration and then we just gave it a little bit more precision detail, and yeah, no, I'm good with it. I'm
absolutely,
it for sure.
Absolutely, great. Brent, a pleasure as usual. I think we've covered this. I have to get editing now and get this together, but I'm sure people will enjoy finding out more about this bike. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Smash that like button.
Instagram, follow us. Yes,
Send us
comments. Send all of your comments to Bruce, because Brent doesn't want to hear it. So you can send all your comments to me. We're on podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're all over the place. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to Patrick for helping us out today. He's been wonderful, and we will see you soon. Thanks. Yep, we're good.